Viewers, there's a concerted effort by some groups in America and in India to malign our majority. A 3-day seminar organized by a group of academics who are hiding behind a veil of anonymity are meeting over the weekend. They will spend 72 hours dismantling, as they call it, Hindutva, an ideology that, according to them, propagates Islamophobia. This online conference is backed by over 45 universities worldwide. A long list of leftists, Marxists, rights activists, and Muslim scholars are in attendance to speak. Most of these speakers are well-known anti-Modi campaigners, anti-NDA campaigners who have poured vitriol on Hinduism, the faith of a majority of Indians. The irony is that the seminar is being held on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks, and at a time when Afghanistan has been overrun by a militia of medieval-minded Islamists who have vowed to wage war on the infidel and civilization that the infidels populate. Opponents of the seminar say that instead of debating the threat posed by Islamists, this group is demonizing Hindus. It brands all those who disagree with the premise as Hindu extremists. Most Hindu groups believe that the reason that organizers of this seminar have chosen to remain anonymous is because their motives are unholy, focused on generating, whipping up hysteria against Hindus or any, for that matter, adherent of political Hinduism. The seminar, they say, could be funded by the Chinese or leftists in America or even Islamists in Pakistan or even the Pakistani government itself to draw false equivalence between Islamist terrorism and Hindutva. Doing so, Hindu community leaders believe, would equate the RSS, the ideological proponent of Hindutva, to the ISIS, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, or even the Taliban. Once discredited, these forces will work to pull levers to get leading democracies to sanction the RSS, perhaps even the courts in India. By extension, it would become impossible for the BJP and the NDA to continue in the democratic mainstream. Opponents of this seminar, organized by an anonymous group, remind us the scenario is not far-fetched. They remind us that the RSS, after all, was banned by the British. It was also banned in 1948, 1975, and 1992. The question then is whether the furor against the summit is justified. Let's put questions to Hindutva icon David Frawley, or Vamdev Shastri as he's known. Mr. Shastri, thank you for speaking to us. David Frawley, thank you for speaking to us. You go by these two names. I'll stick to Dr. Frawley. We are speaking as the United States observes the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and at a time when there's a caliphate that has been established in Afghanistan, and universities across the United States are discussing, Dr. Frawley, dismantling global Hindutva. Do you believe this is tinged with more than a dollop of irony?
Oh, definitely. And thanks for inviting me. It's good to be with you again,
it's a pleasure.
Rahul. But I would like to make one point. This seminar conference is not sponsored by the universities. It's sponsored by some South Asian groups within the universities, not the universities as a whole. And a number of the universities have distanced themselves from the conference. So it is not an overall university event or presented to the university students as a whole. It is a certain department and often a group or one or two people in the department that are doing it. So let's not make it bigger than it is. And of course, there are many Hindus in the universities in America, all doing quite well. And they are respected in various fields and various activities. It is this South Asian group, South Asian Studies, and the leftists within it that are promoting this conference, and they've received a tremendous amount of opposition for it. I think over 1 million responses by Hindu groups to challenge them. They've changed their strategy. The logos of the universities have been removed from the conference. So the conference itself has brought about a lot of controversy. And now it has been perhaps downsized, but at least the big question mark is over it in the universities themselves, as well as the very powerful response of the Hindu community in North America that has challenged its legitimacy and questioned it along all the lines that you have just raised.
Well,
so please bear this in mind.
That's good to know. I mean, this is coming straight from Dr. Frawley, who is in America, so he must be more clued in with the latest developments. But that's really small consolation. There are questions being raised over the identity of the organizers. It remains anonymous as of now. But several self-proclaimed rights activists here, Marxists, leftists, as I've been saying, over the last few days, are queuing up to attend this particular seminar. Should we be according legitimacy to such an anonymous event? I mean, if you have a beef, so to speak, with Hindutva, come out in the open, put your name to the discourse, and let's have an open, fair conversation. But there is no one, it appears, from the side that perhaps people like you represent, Dr. Frawley. This is a closed-door, very exclusive set.
Definitely. And even more so, you have, for example, Kavita Krishnan, who is in the Politburo of a Marxist-Leninist Communist Party in India. And the organizers of this seminar are not highlighting that most of the people in this seminar are Marxist. All are well-known anti-Hindu. None are Hindu scholars. And none have ever said anything good about Hinduism, much less Hindutva. And so the political bias is quite quite in evidence and quite glaring. It's kind of right in your face. And the target is obviously not just simply RSS, but Narendra Modi. And a lot of the anti-Modi, anti-BJP people are with them. And many of them, of course, are coming from India and are well-known anti-Modi, anti-BJP, anti-RSS people of the far left. And you have to remember that in America is not ruled by the far left. And they don't even highlight that these people are communist or Marxist in background. Many of them also have anti-Semitic backgrounds, anti-Israel backgrounds. And there are, of course, students' organizations supporting the Hindus, Hindu organizations, and other groups that are questioning them. But overall, academia tends to be whitewashing the background and motives of these people. In addition, there is no Hindu voice. There are no practicing Hindus on the among the presenters, even though some, again, of course, may have Hindu names. So it's totally biased, one-sided. It's not a debate. It's not a discussion. It is an attempt to attack, or even what I called an academic assault on Hinduism.
Yes, so let's elaborate on this. You've written extensively on this, and I want to understand why you believe it's an assault on Hinduism. There obviously will be other aspects. They're talking about Hindutva. Now, many people here say they're two different things. Hinduism is not a pernicious faith, but Hindutva is a pernicious ideology. How do you address the distinction that they seek to make?
They're actually not making that distinction. None of them have said anything positive about Hinduism. None of them, as we say, are practicing Hindus. They're not quoting any Hindu point of view. None of them are following any Hindu gurus or sampradayas. And in their own presentation elsewhere, they have been anti-Hindu and trying to demean Hindu as everything that has come from the colonial era, superstition, backwardness, worship of a million gods, casteism, anti-other things, and then, of course, posing that global Hinduism, or as I say, global Hindutva is a danger. They can't even identify it. Obviously, there are other global dangers. So they haven't really made a distinction between Hindutva and Hinduism in their actual presentations or their actual ideologies. And of course, Hindutva essentially means Hinduism. Twa is just another way of adding that meaning to that. There is the use of the term Hindutva by Savarkar, and that's another slightly different way. But there is no, this idea that Hindutva or Hinduism is such it is an extreme or a violent or a global threat is really rather silly, particularly on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, when the Taliban has taken over the Afghanistan government. I think the new president was the same person who brought about the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas. They have members in their cabinet that have $1 million rewards on their head from the previous United States government for terrorist activities. You have a list of Al-Qaeda basically heads that are in that. So it seems that their fear is misplaced, or it's even a smokescreen to cover over the more dangerous factors that are happening in the world. And in the Indian context, the leftists, as the Naxalites, have been the main source of terrorism and killing of thousands of people for years. And so it seems to be, I would say, a political attempt to distort and perhaps targeting an American audience that is not so well informed about these issues or knows all the sides involved.
Dr. Frawley, let's talk about global Hindutva, because that's what the exact phrase is that is being referred to. Now, global Hindutva, how does that compare? According to these academics, they believe that global Hindutva is nothing but, saffron Taliban in its outlook now, or saffronized Talibani, outlook. Now, how do you draw that distinction? What would you tell to people who are listening to you? Why are these two not the same?
Well, first of all, let's look at the global Hindu diaspora. Hindus are very affluent, well-educated, and prominent in United States, UK, a lot of the English-speaking countries, and even elsewhere. And the global Hindu diaspora is the most peaceful and probably the most contributing to the societies around of any immigrant community. They're not in prison, they're not promoting terrorism, they're not involved in clandestine activities. Many of them are active, of course, in medicine, in all the computer sciences and new technology and cutting edge of society science. So they are a very positive force there. There are also Hindu temples in most of the main cities of the Western world. And they are beautiful, they are organized, they are well kept, and people are free to come and go. There's only teachings of higher truth going on. There's nothing of that happening. Now, if we look at a government level, the Modi government has very good relations with leaders all over the world. In fact, Modi is the only, I would say, leader today who can speak as friends with Biden, with Putin, with Merkel, with Macron, with the Saudis, with the Iranians, and so forth. So the Indian foreign policy is very inclusive. India is rising economically. India has no troops in other countries. There's no paramilitary groups. They're not sending drones to stop the Hindus from somewhere. So it seems like a totally made up threat. And I don't see where, I would like to see who these dangerous Hindus are they are talking about, what they've done, because they're kind of just promoting a wild fear, hoping that it will strike somebody and that some people will be afraid because they may not know so much about Hindus or Hindutva. And much of what they're doing is just simply name calling, the old leftist vocabulary. You just denigrate your enemy as fascist, biased, anti-this, anti-that, but you don't address issues at all. So I think that This is largely a scam, we might say.
Okay, let me point out certain instances that they, or at least certain practices that they seem to suggest reflects extremist edge to Hindutva. They say that mob lynchings, the garlanding of convicted lynchers, the induction of a UAP accused Sadhvi Pragya as a candidate in the Lok Sabha elections and obviously then goes on to become a member of parliament, the demolition of the Babri Masjid, the incendiary statements made by several BJP leaders, the anti-love jihad campaigns, beef-related violence and other acts. They say these acts qualify Hindutva to be viewed as an extremist ideology, just like the work of the Taliban.
Well, first of all, there's nothing global about the so-called charges that they are making. They're mainly in the India political context. And largely, they're not even proved. The mob lynchings and all these things are largely, there's none of these really show any conviction or anything. In fact, if we look at the terrorism inside of India, almost all of it is by the three groups of the Naxalites, which are, of course, Marxists. They're the largest, have caused the most death and destruction, Maoists. And then, of course, we also have the jihadi and the Islamist of the extreme form. And then we also have the Northeastern, some of the Christian groups there. The Hindu groups are probably, 1% of what is going on in the trouble on the India side. And most of these other things are really exaggerated. The demolition of Babri Masjid, as we know, the Supreme Court of India unanimously ruled that the Hindu temple was there and gave the land back to the Hindus. So that's even been legally totally discredited. A love jihad you also have in UK. Sikh community has complained about it, and even Christians in Kerala have complained about it. So it's difficult to see what exactly they have there. We don't have Hindus with AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades. We don't have Hindus suppressing gays or even killing them. We don't have Hindus forcing women to wear veils or stopping them from speaking or removing them from education or not allowing them in major job positions or political positions. So there seems little credibility to what they are doing. And it seems they're trying to, again, go after people who don't know or people for whom there's an anti-Hindu agenda already. Because there are many groups, as you said, Pakistan, China, missionary groups, people trying to convert Hindus, people who may be jealous of how successful Hindus have been in their diaspora in all the countries, or India rising. So I see more of these vested interests behind it. And these allegations are really lack credibility.
Since we're on the question of Hindutva, and you referred to Mr. Savarkar, let's look at the definition of who is a Hindu according to Mr. Savarkar. And he said, the one who considers this vast stretch of land called Bharat, from the Sindhu, which is the Indus, to the Sindhu, the sea, as the land of one's ancestors and holy land, he's the one who will be termed and remembered as a Hindu. Now, Dr. Froy, let me ask you. The criticism against Savarkar is that this definition of Hindu is exclusive and not inclusive. How do you respond to this?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that his definition of Hindutva is only one of many. And Hindutva is often a synonym for Hinduism in Hindi and other groups. I wrote a book on Hinduism, and when they did the Hindi translation, they also used the term Hindutva. So this is not just about Savarkar. There are many other voices. We have many other, of course, all the Hindu groups throughout the country. And his idea of basically, a Hindu there is basically, we might say, a patriotic Indian to a great degree. And so I don't think we need to put a lot of emphasis on what is said there. And there's certainly no negativity. Many leaders throughout the world talk about the greatness, the holiness of their country, and accepting their value We even have that in the United States, where there's still the certain religious overtone to the American point of view. So I think this is also something, again, that is put out of position. And Savarkar himself was a person who was actually a socialist and an anarchist. And of course, he was one of the main voices of the Indian independence movement, spent lots of time in British jails. So naturally, at that time, also raising this vision of India was very important. So let us put it into the proper context. And of course, the left has been attacking Savarkar as a fascist, which totally isn't true. And our friend Vikram Sampath has written 2 extraordinary volumes explaining Savarkar in great detail and removing these distortions. So that is how I would view it.
Yes, I've read Vikram Sampath's 2-part biography of Savarkar. In fact, he's going to be on a panel right after Dr. Frawley. I wrap this interview up with you. But I just want you to focus on what he has written and when he sort of refers to Savarkar. Yes, he was a champion of Hindu unity, but he had no reservations about the word secularism or secular. He repeatedly outlined his idea of India as a country where the state would not have any religious identity or affiliation, that it would be a society based on merit and not reservations. We all know he had such major disagreements with Mahatma Gandhi. He had more kin with Dr. Ambedkar on this particular issue. In fact, the constitution of the Hindustan Free State that the Hindu Mahasabha later under Savarkar came out with was a secular document, explicitly stating that there shall be no state religion for Hindustan Free State or any of its provinces. Now, are those who are painting Savarkar as a vitriolic anti-Muslim figure ignoring this? And if so, why?
They're totally ignoring it. And again, they're also ignoring that Savarkar as a socialist wasn't a figure of the right or the so-called fascist at all. In some ways, he was more of a philosophical person than a religious person. He was not anti-Muslim in any way, or he was against caste, so many things. So yes, the distortion of Savarkar has been there. And also an over focus on certain aspects there. But there's really, again, they're kind of making a smokescreen out of nothing and then trying to go to the past. Savarkar should certainly be honored as one of the great figures of the Indian independence movement, also a great writer and dramatist. And his view of honoring India as a great country should also be taken into effect. And so we, again, smoke screens, making false allegations and then forcing your opponent to refute them. And then also negationism, denial of what the person's actually doing, name calling. That has been the Marxist scholarship. That was the textbooks of Russia, of the Soviet Union, and of the communist China. So please understand the propaganda approach that is being used there to denigrate great figures of the Indian independence movement. Nehru hardly was subject to the sufferings of Savarkar, and the state of Maharashtra has embraced him. Even the Congress party in Maharashtra has embraced Savarkar. So let's, as you say, let's really understand what was there.
Dr. Frawley, thank you very much for speaking to me. This has been enlightening. Let's hope we can speak about other issues sooner than later. Thank you very much. Let's open this up further. We are joined by a whole panel of other luminaries. R. Jagannathan, editorial director of Swarajya, Rahul Ishwar, an activist, Vikram Sampath, who has written 2 extraordinary volumes on the works of Savarkar. We also have with us Dr. T.A. Rahmani, National Secretary of the SDPI, PFI. There's Mr. Pavan Verma, author and former MP, who has done scholarship on Hinduism himself. So let me begin first with Mr. Pavan Verma. Mr. Verma, many people are upset. And they're saying that, look, this so-called Dismantle Hindutva project that has been undertaken at a time when the world should actually be trying to dismantle Islamist jihad and during a week when the world is marking the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, is actually a thinly veiled attack on Hinduism itself. It reeks of Hinduphobia, and it must be dismissed as such, and that if anyone really wanted to do a proper academic analysis, it would have included individuals like perhaps Vikram Sampath or Dr. Frawley or Mr. Jagannathan or others like Rahul Ishwar, or perhaps even members of the RSS, etc., etc. You wouldn't have gone and done this anonymously. What is your view, Mr. Verma?
I would not have done it anonymously. I would have not liked it focused entirely abroad. I would have liked to make it as broad-based and inclusive. That said, I believe the essential thing in this entire debate is to draw the distinction between Hinduism, Hindutva, and political Hindutva. As far as Hindutva is concerned, if it means the essence of Hinduism, I have no quarrel with it. But there is a vast difference between Hinduism and its political manifestation, which is Hindutva. And I believe the political manifestation of Hindutva poses a challenge to the fundamental doctrines, beliefs and value system of Hindus, Hinduism and Hindu civilization. Why do I say that? Hinduism is a remarkable religion, and with it is associated a remarkable civilization. Hinduism is definable and identifiable by its conquering eclecticism, its tolerance of diversity, its dialogic nature, and its amazing celebration. One of the Mahavakyas of Hinduism is Ekam Satya Vipraha Bahuda Vedanti. The truth is one, wise people call it by different names. They had the courage millennia ago, when tribes thought that they were supreme and everything beyond it was suspect, to say, Ano Bhadra Kritavo Yantu Vishvata, let good thoughts flow to me from all directions. They could say without hesitation, Udar Charitanam Vasudev Kutumbukam. The entire world is a family. Hinduism has progressed through millennia and is a Sanatan religion today because of these attributes. What does political Hindutva do? Political Hindutva represents the lumpenization of Hinduism and the attempt to make a great religion, a Wahhabi doctrine, which is a sacrilege. What are the very basic features of political Hindutva? It is based on very little knowledge. In fact, the evangelism and activism of Hindutva political activists is in inverse proportion to their knowledge. It's against dialogue. It is ultra-orthodox because it is ignorant. It is conservative. It is patriarchal. It is upper caste. It has no hesitation in taking the law into its own hands. And it is prone to violence. That is why we see groups of people in Hindutva, and I am not exaggerating one aspect, I am illustrating it only, who don't understand anything of Sri Ram, making a helpless person chant Jai Shri Ram as they continue to beat him or even kill him. But that's only one example. There are so many others. Brands of marauds of people going around haranguing youngsters in a park without knowing what the whole concept of dharma, artha, kama, moksha is.
Okay.
Without knowing the Confucian balance of the Hindu worldview. So, given this, I say that political Hindutva poses a challenge to Hindus and Hinduism itself, and especially, and I'll finish in 10 seconds, to women. What they should eat, what they should wear, how they should dress, how they should behave, whether they are chaste or not, in accordance with some thekedars of Hinduism. Okay. I believe this is distorting Hinduism, the bigotry, the exclusion and the violence.
Who are these thekedars, and what is in praxis, the manifestation of political Hindutva? Who represents it in this country? Very quickly.
I just explained its features. I
know the features.
I just explained its features.
I want to understand.
This is what political Hindutva represents.
Who is the vector?
And you see it,
name the vector. Who is the vector?
I think it is that it is those among the Hindus who believe that they have a monopoly on
Who are these?
Hinduism and how to interpret it.
Who are these?
And I
Let's
would say
define
that
them.
I would say that they are drawn largely. I would say that they are drawn very largely from the ultra-right wing Hindu spectrum, including from
right-wing.
cadres like the Bajrang Dal, many from the RSS, and certainly from the BJP as well. And
Okay.
we have seen examples of this in recent times.
Okay, so you've defined
I
the-
mean, if you
okay,
take
now you've
one
defined-
historical data fact,
Okay, one second. Now you've defined the articulators of this, as you called it, a Wahhabi doctrine. Okay. Let me bring in Vikram Sampath and R. Jagannathan.
Yeah, two things. One, Pawan talked about the greatness of the Hindu civilization, but I think he has typecast Hindutva into a very narrow slot, because just like there are many strains within Hinduism, there are many strains of thought within Hindutva. You have a Savarkarite thought, you have others who merely think that Hindutva is the right way and are seeking a common identity in order to fight for your rights. For example, if you are talking about fighting for the freeing temples from state control, why is it that no secular party which claims to be fighting Hindutva is not even taking up a Hindu cause? So the point is, that's the other thing. We have caste in Hinduism, right? Now, unless you try and build a larger Hindu identity, which is not based on the extremes that Vermaji was talking about, which is about people who might be lynching, some cow smugglers on the streets or whatever it is. I'm not talking about that element which is violent and narrow-minded. I'm talking about, if you want to get out of this straitjacket of caste, you need to build some larger identity which allows you to erase those caste differences. So there are many strands in Hindutva, just like there are many strands in Hinduism. So we should not think that the whole of Hindutva is about bashing up some poor people here and there. So I think we need to take nuance in this. You cannot dismantle Hindutva without defining it. If you say you want to deal with violent Hindutva, which is this thing, then there is there is a validity to it. But you don't have to uproot Hinduness. Hinduness does not mean that you will not talk back. Hinduness does not mean that you will defend your culture. It does not mean that you will not fight for your rights. I mean, the ability of Hindus to talk back is important, and that's a strand of Hindutva that we need to recognize. So I think dismantling Hindutva needs to be defined. These fellows are mixing up a whole lot of issues. They may not like the BJP in power, so they're using it to say some kind of majoritarianism is being done. How can there be any majoritarianism in Hinduism when it is not driven by one book, one founder, one set of fundamentals? We have so many contradictory ideas, and all of them are eclectically chosen, and each one has its own strand. So there is no fundamentalism in that sense, except the fundamentalism of diversity, and as Pawan Vermaji says in his book, the audacity of thought. So the point is, the audacity is what the Conference on Hindutva is trying to reduce it to a very narrow focus of people who might be beating up other people. So that is the point. I think we need to, just like Hinduism has its diversities, Hindutva ideology also has its diversities, and we need to separate one from the other. We should not assume that all of it is patriarchal. In fact, Hindutva gives opportunity for women actually to come out, which earlier they never. I mean, the Ram Temple movement, for example, brought out a lot of women onto the streets where earlier they were confined to this thing. So I think it is also a liberating idea, because you are now coming into the public space instead of keeping your religion entirely private and at home. It's more patriarchal. Traditional Hinduism can be more patriarchal because you confine it to the home. So now you are in public spaces, you bring people out fighting for causes. That's quite different. So I think let's have nuance in this argument and not condemn anybody who claims to be following a Hindutva philosophy and say whole of it is wrong. That's the problem.
And there's also a reformist strain within Hindutva too. It's not as if it is, confined to one set of principles which are immutable. Let me bring in Vikram Sampath also on this. Vikram Sampath, you've heard Mr. Pawan Verma. You've also heard Mr. R. Jagannathan. What's your view on this particular conference or seminar or brainstorm, call it what you want to? The very fact that I feel that Mr. Pawan Verma had to start off by saying if this particular conference draws a distinction between Hinduism, Hindutva, and political Hindutva, the fact that he had to use the word if means that it is not clear as to what its agenda is beyond perhaps viewing, as Mr. Jagannathan has said, the whole of Hindutva as something worthy of being dismantled.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for inviting me. And I couldn't agree more with my dear friend Jaggi, who postulated very clearly that just as there is diversity within Hinduism, there is also a diversity within Hindutva. You're absolutely right. Nobody really knows what this conference is all about because of the anonymity in which it is shrouded. There was no call for papers announced. I mean, any academic conference is held in such a way that there are multiple viewpoints, multiple thoughts, and as Dr. David Frawley also mentioned, scholars representing another point of view. An academic conference is supposed to be a confluence of different voices and debate among all of them. You cannot have a group of people with a known political agenda getting together and masquerading a political event as a scholastic conference. And then if there is a backlash against that, then also cry victim card saying we are being tarnished and academic freedom is being muscled and all of that. So it's a very self-perpetuating victim trap that people like this play. But then be that as it may, we know the tactics. And I think the response that is coming is from people who not necessarily have anything to do with the BJP or the RSS. If you've seen, the government or even the RSS has remained rather quiet on this issue. And the actual outrage is being, and legitimate outrage is being led by people, Hindus, students in America, students and people working in the US, where the Hindus are in a minority. And we say that, even calling the coronavirus as a Chinese virus is a racist slur, and it'll actually stigmatize the Chinese people who are working in the US. But you can organize a conference like this, where even the logos of universities were actually put there by stealth. So there's a lot of smokescreen that's going on there. But then to Pavanji's earlier point, we all do know, that the Hindu philosophy is very, very egalitarian. It allows for different streams. There is no sense of blasphemy and all of that. But then all that would be fine if we were dealing within ourselves. We also constantly dealing with theologies which do not accept these multiple paths. We are dealing with theologies which say my way or the highway, that there's just one path to that truth, and anybody who does not belong to that, who does not subscribe to the one book or the one message, are non-believers and infidels who have to be treated in the most terrible way. And we're not talking of prehistoric times or medieval times. We're talking even of what is happening right now in our vicinity, the very, very dangerous geopolitical situation we have in Afghanistan. And also, in Kashmir, we have seen what happened with the Pandits, or in Bengal recently. So in such a scenario, Hindutva, the way it evolved and how Veer Savarkar defined it in 1923, was this coming together, a Hindu consolidation. It was going beyond the definition of religion to a larger embrace of not only nationalism, but also social reforms, social consolidation, and unity. And in fact, I quote in my book a very, very illuminating conversation between Savarkar and Maulana Shaukat Ali, who started one of the main leaders of the Khilafat movement along with Mahatma Gandhi. And that explains what Hindutva is. And I'd like to quote that. This conversation happens in 1925 when the two of them meet in Bombay.
Yes.
And Shaukat Ali asks Savarkar not to go ahead with all these Shuddhi movements and the Hindu Sangathan or organization movement, to which Savarkar says, for centuries, we've had thieves and dacoits coming to our house and looting it. Now we have actually become aware and we're putting a lock on the door. And then it's not the case of the dacoit to then come back and say that you are not allowing me to loot you, and that is going to spoil relationships between us. And he says this, and I quote him, our Sangathan, as in the Hindu Sangathan, is not against you or anybody else. It is only for self-defense and protection against any kind of atrocity that we might face now or in the future. As long as the Hindu Sangathan movement is not violent, aggressive, usurping of your rights, property, or life, and as long as it stands for truth and self-protection, why should anyone have a grouse with it? As long as all these communal movements and missions of Aga Khan or Hassan Nizami or the Khilafat carry on, as long as thousands of Hindus are being forcibly coerced and converted, as long as Urdu newspapers openly proclaim the agenda to mass convert Hindus, in the next 5 to 10 years, advising Hindus to give up any attempts to organize and protect themselves for the sake of some mirage that you call as national unity is utter hypocrisy, unquote. So the fulcrum of Hindutva as it was conceptualized, Rahul, was as that vehicle of self-defense. It was not predatory. It was not violent. It was also looking at cleansing Hindu society of all its evils. It stood for social reform, a casteless society. So Hindutva to me is Hindu modernity, Hindu social reform. It's also Hinduism that resists when predatory attempts are made on it. And to deny that these predatory attempts are being made either in India or outside India, more so, I think is living in a fool's paradise. So while we may have all these lofty philosophical principles, we are also dealing with people who do not subscribe to these same lofty principles. So will unilateral goodness or unilateral virtuosity, will that really help? Or you need to at least be on your guard to protect yourself. You don't have to be the person, raising the first stone or being the violent person. But if an attack is being made on you, are you just going to sit down pusillanimously and face that? Or are you going to organize yourself to give it back?
Okay, Mr. Verma, you raised your hand very quickly. Quick interjection. I have 2 other speakers and I'm under time pressure. Yes.
So very quickly, I just want to reiterate my distinction. If we are talking of Hindutva as the essence of Hinduism, I don't believe we need to dismantle it. But there is a problem in the manifestation of Hindutva which we have to acknowledge. Now it depends what is the yardstick you use, Rahul. If your yardstick is what the Taliban is doing in Afghanistan,
I knew you would say
then
that.
Of course there is very little that we are doing which compares to that.
I knew you would
so
say
that cannot be the yardstick. The yardstick has to be the.
I haven't used that yardstick.
Sorry, Rahul, may I complete?
You know, Pavanji, I haven't used that yardstick. It is the people
No, I'm not saying that.
No, 1 second. It's the people who
I'm not saying you.
No, I know. But I'm just saying, it's the people who've organized this particular conference, the faceless, nameless people who have used that yardstick. And I feel that that's where the unfairness is built in. Of course, there are lumpens in every society and opportunistically they can lay claim to any ideology to unleash violence. I mean, we have the greatest violence happening in the heart of our
country. Okay, let me just give one example and I'll end.
In the name of Marxism.
My good friend Vikram mentioned that we have the right to defend ourselves. I fully agree with you. We are not a passive religion. This is a religion where Adi Shankaracharya could say, Shivoham, Shivoham, I am Shiva and I am Shiva. This is the audacity which Jagannathanji was mentioning. We are not a passive religion. We can fight for our rights. Yes. But how do you explain, for instance, when members of the Shri Ram Sene barge into a restaurant, beat up women, create desecration and violence and tell the women you are behaving in an unchaste manner in accordance with the Hindutva we believe in?
You must have heard of
what kind of Hinduism's manifestation is this?
No. Religion is also the last, as you know, and this is a phrase.
I'm not trying to.
Look,
I'm not trying to tar everyone.
No, I'm saying you are assuming that the Shri Ram Sene is taken seriously by other members of the Hindu community. That is where the problem begins and ends. We make this, and I want to bring in Rahul Ishwar.
Fortunately, they are not.
But I want to come in there because, you see, we make this distinction painfully about Muslims. We say that Muslims don't subscribe to Wahhabism, Salafi, outlook of the Lashkar-e-Toiba. We add these caveats, but when it comes to Hindus, we're all made to feel bad about ourselves constantly. Because some lumpen, some Joe Blow decides to put on a saffron no offense to you, Vikram Sampath, saffron kurta, chant a few words, and pass himself off as some defender of the faith. When people like you, people like Vikram Sampath, R. Jagannath, myself, Mr. Rahul Ishwar, militate against that, both mentally, intellectually. I want to bring in Rahul Ishwar. Why is such a big wide berth given to every other faith in this country, but not Hindus? I don't understand.
Rahul Shivshankarji, divine or devil lie in the details. It's always found in the nuances. Rightly, whenever we deal with our Muslim brothers, we have a lot of nuances with them, and we should be rightly doing so. I am a Hindu who believes in the Gandhian line. But the issue with this conference, or a possible issue with this conference, is this conference is less of an academic nature and more of an activist nature. Please even see the wordings, dismantling. It is less about discussion or debate, and even their word, the tone and tenor has an activist, perhaps a bit aggressive mode. That's cannot be overlooked. And just look at the last conference they are having from 1:30, the last session. It's about Islamophobia, white supremacy, and Hindutva. Had it been about Islamism, white supremacy and Hindutva, and say that every religion or every ideology or every community has these kind of lumpen elements and we should be opposing it, it would have been more fair. See, a great person like Pavan Vermaji, whose book on Shankara really gives us more inspiration to love Shankara and to understand him, will be a master of nuance. But how much the normal people will have that dexterity for nuance? Wouldn't it become a tool to harass Hindu students, especially outside India? Hindus are a minority there. Hindus are a kind of minority who faces racism, who faces some kind of persecution and abuse, especially in the West, due to many reasons. Won't it become another tool saying that just like we have to prove secularism every day, they will also have to prove some kind of extra loyalty, saying that we are not communal? So this creates a precondition, a precaution, so that many people have to be on extra guard and extra vigil. And just like Vikram Sampathji earlier said, I know I'm a fan of his book, Veer Savarkar. Veer Savarkar is always vilified. People like Chandranath Basu, Veer Savarkar, people had different definitions. Even inside the Hindutva spectrum, you had G.D. Savarkar, who was a bit more of a tough line. We have Guruji Golwalkar, who later went on to say that uniform civil code is unnecessary. What we need is Hindu-Muslim brotherhood. So there are many shades, many nuances inside the Hindutva political field too. So unfortunately, this conference is not discussing, but taking the entire paradigm and saying that demonizing the entire Hindutva paradigm is unfair. Demonizing an entire socio-political construct of Hindutva. Yes, Hinduism as a philosophy is different, but Hinduness or Hindutva as a socio-political paradigm, demonizing an entire spectrum of ideas without having any nuance is very unfortunate. And even in an era where we are discussing September 11 attacks or Afghanistan or taking over of Taliban, there is not even a mention of Islamism or a global terror plot, and they are comparing Islamophobia with Hindutva and white supremacy. So there seems to be a bias.
You're saying selectivity. So let me bring in our last speaker.
Yes, exactly.
I don't have much time. I have about 4 minutes. Dr. Rahmani is here with us. Now, he's a member of a political party called the SDPI, whose sister organization, according to the NIA, according to chart sheets and the courts, chopped the hands of a professor because there was a disagreement about certain fundamental aspects of the outlook of the SDPI. Allegedly murdered RSS leaders, joined the ISIS, at least cadres are known to have joined the ISIS in Syria. But the SDPI is not banned. It isn't a political pariah. It contests elections. Where are the Muslim academics or even the so-called leftists or anyone else of that persuasion attending this conference in the United States, holding a seminar asking or calling upon the wider community to dismantle the Islamist outlook of the SDPI? Now, Dr. Rahmani, this is the selectivity that people are upset about. Isn't this valid?
I think, Rahul, I am here to speak on the subject you mentioned for the debate today, and you have deviated, when it's my turn, you have deviated to the SDPI and PFI, and without any substantiative evidence, you have put so many of time in so many allegations which are never proved. For last 10 years you are speaking the same language and there are no evidences. So how can I comment on those things which are not proven at any forum by NIA or any government agencies, or just speaking on the television, does it mean that whosoever is speaking
Actually,
is right?
I take a little bit of offense.
So if you
Dr. Hemani,
want me to
please,
speak
I
on
take
the
a little bit of
subject,
offense.
you are most welcome. I can
The
speak.
courts,
But if you want
the courts,
me to comment on such
Dr.
kind of
Hemani,
thing, I
see,
think you are wasting my and your
I
own
wanted
time.
just a modicum. Okay, I'm not wasting your time, but I just want to correct the record here. The three instances that I'm talking about. Now, let me elaborate on them. The court held guilty members of the Popular Front of India, sir, for chopping off the hands of Professor Joseph. This is a well-documented fact. Just Google it. It'll come up on your screens. People have served time in jail for this crime. The second issue, the Kerala government itself filed an affidavit in the High Court, sir, detailing the fact that they believe that the SDPI/PFI is a Islamist extremist organization that should actually be banned in the country. The Chief Minister of Kerala in a previous dispensation has come out and publicly said these things. There are n number of NIA charge sheets detailing crimes, sir, by members of your group on RSS workers, especially in Karnataka. And also, sir, there is enough publicly available information which proves that PFI members, which you have never disowned, have joined the ISIS in Syria. Now, I'm only asking a more fundamental question. How is it that people do not hold conferences? Where does the secular creed go in this country, the so-called secular creed go in this country, when it comes to legitimizing the SDPI and bringing it to mainstream politics? This is a question that we need to also
I'm sorry
ask.
that I cannot comment on your speech.
Okay, sir. I then will wrap up the show.
Your speech because
I
you
will
cannot
then wrap up
justify
the show.
Whatever the radicalized Hindutva is doing a country, you cannot justify by putting
I am not,
SDPI or
sir,
PFI,
drawing any false
in place of
equivalence.
that,
I am only
without
coming
any evidence or
out
without any
with a
substantial.
basic
So I'm
question.
not going to participate
That
therein
is
at all.
okay,
And I will
sir.
not
That is your
comment on
choice,
such kind
Dr.
of
Saab.
thing.
That is your
You
choice.
are only
I
promoting
respect
the
your
radicalized
choice.
Hindutva by such
I respect your
tactics.
choice. I leave it at this. I leave it at this. We've had
Thank
a
you.
constructive conversation. You've heard different points of view. I don't want to reduce it to a.
I honor all those views.
I don't want to reduce.
They are very intelligent.
Okay,
and
I don't
very
want to reduce
thought-provoking interactions, and I salute all these speakers over here.
I also salute our panelists. I leave it at this, viewers. You've heard the views. I don't want to resort to name calling at the end of this show. We've had a great constructive discussion. I think we've been able to address certain questions here. And it now really devolves upon those who are organizing this particular conference to justify their motives. Because I think they stand exposed to quite an extent. We leave it at this.